The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. That time Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman of that district came and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But Jesus did not say a word in answer to her. Jesus' disciples came and asked him, "Send her away. She keeps calling after us." He said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did Jesus homage, saying, "Lord, help me." He said in reply, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." Then Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And the woman's daughter was healed from that hour. The Gospel of the Lord. 3,000 years before the time of Jesus, the Canaanite people left the area that is now known as Turkey and Syria, and they emigrated south. They ended up in the area which is now identified as Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Lebanon. They traveled there as a people. Their remains have been found by scientists. 92 remains of that era. And some of them they've identified as Canaanites. And one thing that stands out from those remains is that they have DNA in common. These people were not merely a tribe, they were family. They were related to one another, which was very similar to what the Jewish people were. When they began, they were 12 tribes, coming from the 12 sons of Jacob. And so as the people evolved, they all have common ancestry. And it was a common practice for first cousins to marry one another. Mary and Joseph were first cousins in Nazareth, because in that way they maintained the tribe. They maintained an interrelationship, and it became for them, they were not only just a tribe, but extended family. So the Canaanites moved into this new area. Some of them went towards the Mediterranean to the west, the part now which is now the southern part of Lebanon. The rest of them traveled farther south into what would become Samaria and Judea, and they would live there. About 2,000 years later, the Israelites came. They came over the Jordan River by Jericho, led by Joshua. And they were entering what Moses had told them was their promised land. And so they took it over. They made war on all of these tribes in the area, including the Canaanites, and drove them out. But the Canaanites survived in the northern part. They established two cities, Tyre and Sidon. Tyre is one of the oldest cities in the world. It's much like Jericho and about the same age. It's a very ancient city. One thing that's famous about Tyre is that it is where the snails produce a purple color that was used in royal garments to make them purple. It's very expensive. I don't know how much a little snail gives out, but it probably took a lot of them. Very labor intensive for the snails and for the people. But they were famous for producing this purple dye, Tyre and Sidon. And so we hear in the gospel today, that's where Jesus has headed. He's gone to Tyre and Sidon. This is not a Jewish area. This is a Gentile area. These are pagan people that live there. And he would go there from time to time, and also he would go on the other side of the Sea of Galilee over into the area called the Decapolis, which were 10 pagan cities. And some of it, I think, gave him a break. Gave him a break from his ministry and all the tensions and all the complexities of his relationship with the Jewish people. And it allowed him to relax. The pagans weren't worried about theology or tradition or their ancestors or the prophets. And Jesus could just relax with his disciples. So apparently he's done that here. That's why it says he withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And who does he run into? But a Canaanite woman. She's the descendant of these Canaanites that had come 2,000 years before. She's one of them. She's a pagan, a Gentile. But she has heard about Jesus. She approaches him, seems to know who he is. She says to him, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David." Son of David, she's recognizing him as a Jewish man who have their heritage coming down from King David 1,000 years before. But in the Greek, what she says, English is "have pity on me." The Greek is eleison me Kyrie. Have mercy on me, Lord. Eleison me Kyrie. This is very similar to what we heard last week. Remember about Peter, he's in the water. He's gone out to walk on the water to meet with Jesus, and he becomes afraid, and he begins to sink. And he says to Jesus, "Lord, save me, Kyrie suson me." Suson me, save me. Well, Jesus immediately does. He reaches out, takes him by the hand. He's not going to let poor Peter drown, and takes him up, and they go get into the boat. Kyrie suson me. But this Canaanite woman in the Greek is saying, "Have mercy," eleison. We hear that in the Mass. It's the only Greek that's in the Mass, left over from ancient days. Kyrie eleison. Lord, have mercy on us. But rather than interacting with her like Jesus did with Peter, he ignores her. Just ignores her, won't talk to her. There's some things going on here culturally. Jewish men would not talk to Jewish women in public. That would be unseemly. So that's one factor. The other factor has to do with her being a pagan and a Gentile, that he's not going to interact with her because she's one of them. One of them. And she tells him that my daughter is tormented by a demon. And the disciples are becoming irritated with her. She seems to be persistent. They tell Jesus, "Send her away. She's bothering us. She keeps yelling out after us." And Jesus explains to the disciples that I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and she's not one of them. She's one of those others. I was sent for the lost sheep of Israel. But now the woman's become really upset, frantic. In English, she says, "Lord, help me," but that doesn't capture the tension and the drama of the Greek. In the Greek, it's Kyrio bonthei moi. Bonthei. Bonthei. This is screaming, hair on fire, carrying on, screaming and yelling. Bonthei. It's very dramatic. It's a particular kind of yelling because she's trying to get his attention. "Lord, help me. Help me." She's so frantic about her daughter, and he's not going to deal with her. And so he finally begins to talk to her. Okay, now this lady's got his attention. He stopped ignoring her. Now he's going to actually speak to her. Jesus says to her, "It's not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." He's talking about his ministry, throwing it to the dogs. It's what the Jewish people called the Gentiles, the pagans. They were dogs. But again, the Greek shows a more dynamic way of listening to that. In Greek, skoulos is a regular dog. Bow wow, dog runs around on the street. There were probably a lot of them. Wild dogs. That's a skoulos, but that's not the word used in the gospel. Throw it to the dogs. Kunarios is the word used in the Greek in that sentence, the dogs. What kunarios means it's a little worthless dog. It's not just a dog. It's a little worthless dog. And that's what he's calling her, a little worthless dog. But okay, now she's very courageous, and she's also very smart, because okay, now she's going to take this Jewish guy on. She's not going to tolerate him doing this to her. So she says, please, Lord, even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters. Even the dogs, the little worthless dogs, get something. They're not totally shut out. Jesus thinks about that. In my imagination, I can hear the wheels in his head turning. He's thinking about that because it's countering his culture and how he was raised. Jesus was a human being like all things but sin, so he had to learn. He didn't come out of the sky pre-made like a spaceman. He had to learn like we do. Mary and Joseph had to teach him how to do numbers. They had to teach him how to read. They had to teach him how to behave as a child in their society. They had to teach him how to be a man. He didn't just know that. They had to teach him. And so at this point, Jesus is thinking about how he's been raised and the attitude of his culture towards the Gentiles, the little worthless dogs. And you know what Jesus does? He changes his mind. He changes his mind. He pushes against that prejudice in his culture and says no. And so he's going to be open to this woman's request. Jesus says to this pagan, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. The woman's daughter was healed from that hour. Jesus has changed his mind. He's not only been sent to the people of Israel, he's been sent for this woman and all pagans and Gentiles. So huge change in Jesus' attitudes towards people who weren't Jewish. The church will continue this tension in the culture because Peter and Paul will have this huge fight about going out and evangelizing the Gentiles. And they will eventually settle it, and Paul will go out and bring Christianity to the Gentiles. But it was huge change. And so we are called too, as Christians, to think about our prejudices, the way we think about people. How do we regard them? How do we treat them? Think of the huge step Jesus needed to take out of his Jewish culture and deal with this woman openly and as an equal. We are called to do the same. Ingrained in our culture, too, just like Jesus' time, is prejudice. It's hatred. It's violence. It's demeaning other people. People who aren't like us. They don't look like us. They don't talk like us. They don't come from places we come from. They maybe have a different sexual orientation. They come in speaking different languages. Maybe they have a lifestyle that doesn't meet our standards. They're not well behaved in our eyes. And so we can demean them, attack them, be angry at them, dismiss them, discriminate against them. Just like Jesus was doing to this Canaanite woman, they hardly even exist, and we give them nothing. But we're called to listen now to this change in Jesus' mind, to have the mind of Jesus. He's no longer this prejudiced, demeaning attitude that he inherited from his culture towards the Gentiles. But we are called also to think about who are the Gentiles in our lives. Who are the ones that we don't relate to very well? The ones that maybe we find offensive, or maybe we don't agree with them. Maybe we scream at them on the television or get upset in the car listening to them on the radio. Who are we rejecting in our minds out of a prejudice and a predisposition to be against these people, no matter who they are or what they've done? And so if Jesus can change his mind, we can change ours. We too can open up ourselves to the people who are other than we are, just as Jesus did with this Canaanite woman. We too can open it up, relax the boundaries, and let these people in. Let these people in, not only into society, but into the church. There's a hostility ingrained in our culture that's now promoted because of mass communication and the Wi-Fi. It seems to be getting worse. We're becoming more tribal than we used to be. It's sort of like, it's me, it's what I want, it's what I believe, it's who I am, and the rest of you are bad. In fact, I might have the firm belief that I'm so good and you're so bad that God thinks like I do. Can you imagine that, having that thought? That God thinks like I do. God doesn't think like that. That's clearly demonstrated in the gospel. Because as Jesus approached this Canaanite woman, changed his mind, and then began to treat her with respect, so we're called to do the same. Change our attitudes, change our behavior. You don't have to like the people, and you don't even have to approve of what they do or how they live or the choices they make, but we're called to be open to them, as Jesus became to this Canaanite woman, to be open to them as children of God. Is that what she was? She's a child of God. Oh, great is your faith. And so we're called to do the same, to be open to everyone as a child of God and welcome them into this community, into our society, and to accept them because as Jesus changed his mind, so we're called to change ours as well and to be open to all of these children of the Most High.